You are listening to the Game Like Training podcast, where we talk about college golf, the PGA Tour, golf practice, golf learning, and golf psychology, amongst all other things golf. On this show, we're going to be sharing our thoughts and our beliefs that have come really from over a decade of being in the industry. And not only that, but we're going to be talking to industry leaders, world-renowned academics, and pioneering professors to bring you the most up-to-date information and evidence-based strategies to improve your golf game or your coaching. Hey, I'm one of your hosts, Matthew Cook.
And I'm co-host Eric Zogel. To get things started, just want to say we love golf and we love helping people. That combined has driven us to document and create this podcast. There's so much good information and strategies out there that we genuinely believe it is our sacred responsibility to share that information with as many people as we can. Please share the podcast, give it a like, leave us an honest review, make suggestions on what you would like us to cover. Matthew, we've got a pretty exciting guest today. Looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, so today on the show we have Jacob Clarke, and thanks for joining us, Jacob. Really appreciate your time and energy. Jacob is a staff design engineer at Ping Golf, so we're very fortunate to have him on the show today. He's going to be talking more about what he does and what a staff design engineer actually entails. But I know more recently, and for a little bit of time now, Jacob's been really working with Wedges and wedge play, so that's going to be at the heart of our conversation and topic today. But Jacob, can you do us all a favor and just tell us who you are and what you do at Ping Golf, and a little bit more about staff design engineer, and maybe give some examples of how that pertains to wedges?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me on, guys. Really exciting to go through something that I'm really passionate about and share about wedges. So I've been working at Ping for about 4 years now, full time. I actually worked here for 2 summers when I was as an intern for 2 summers. Went to Clemson in South Carolina. I bleed orange. Love my Tigers. From North, so always got to throw in a little name drop to the university there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
coming.
Yeah, Matthew, I'm sure you had that one called out, ready to go. But yeah, I'm from North Carolina, grew up, born and raised there, always kind of been around the game my whole life, and played a lot of soccer growing up. That was kind of my first love, I would say. And then when I was about 12 or 13, I just got hooked on golf. Had always been around the game, like I said. Really enjoyed going out to play with my dad, my grandfather. But when I was about 12 or 13 and was kind of old enough to go out on my own, we were lucky enough to be members at a country club, and it was parents would drop you off in the morning, pick you up on the way home from work, spending all kinds of time out there. And that just really transitioned into a huge love for the game. And it's just given me opportunities to be where I am today. So like I said, I've been at Ping for about 4 years in the product development team. So what we're working on is all the products that you see coming to market, and then also trying to be the leaders in golf physics and understanding the game of golf. So like I said, over the last couple of years, and as Matthew and Eric introed, my first design project was the Glide 2.0. So the wedges that are out in the marketplace right now. And through that, I've just gained this huge love and passion for all things wedges. I've continued to work on that for the last couple of years, and it's something that's been really cool to see grow, and really looking forward to diving into some more about wedges today. So thanks again for having me, fellas.
Man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. I'm going to let Eric's got a really good question, I think, to start with. So I'm going to let him go into it. But awesome intro. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, so I guess first question, what are the main things that tour players are really looking for in wedges? And what do they value the most about their wedge game? And I guess how can amateur golfers, or what can be the big takeaways for amateur golfers when it comes to finding the appropriate wedge that suits their game?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, to design the best wedges, you have to learn from the best. And what better proving ground than the PGA Tour, especially. So that's been one of the coolest things about my job, especially over the last few years, is working with the best players in the world. So it all kind of started. We have players come into our factory here in Phoenix pretty frequently. So when they're here, get to spend time with them for a few minutes. But it really started off in 2015, I believe. I went up to the Shriners event in Las Vegas and spent 3 days there with our tour reps and the rest of our PGA Tour staff, and just spent time with the players and like learned what they like in their wedges and just tried to really understand what are the elements of a great wedge for them. Like, how do they use the different clubs in their bag to hit different kinds of shots? What are their techniques? And then also like learning how do those techniques correlate to different wedge designs. But I think kind of going back to your question, I think what the tour players are looking for the most is just the highest level of consistency. And we're not just talking consistency in landing spot. We're talking about consistency in the flight, and then also the turf interaction. And we think, based on the way our philosophy is with wedge, is that if we can absolutely nail the turf interaction for the player in various conditions, firm, soft, rough, fairway, bunkers, if we nail that turf interaction or ground interaction, we know that we're going to have a great capture of the golf ball. And we're going to have really nice consistency in the flight. I know y'all are golfers, and the most dreaded shot for me is like when I'm hitting a wedge from like 50 yards, I'm trying to hit a nice like low flighted one, and it like slips up the face and just floats and comes up short. You're just like, oh, this is driving me mad. Like I can't take this.
That's on the daily for me, dude. Like all the
yeah, it's really frustrating. So I think that's one of the cool things is like by absolutely nailing the turf interaction with these players, we can get them the consistent flight that they're looking for, because they need the highest level of predictability playing on the PGA Tour each week. So I think if we can, when we're working with these players, if we can really just really dial in the way that golf club's hitting the ground for them, we can get them a wedge in their hands that helps them play their best. Like that's been Carson Solheim's motto since the beginning, is play your best. Like we want to get golfers, tour players, 18 handicaps, beginners. We want them to have the absolute best wedges possible for them so they can play their best. And what's really cool about wedges is that the best wedge for you, Matthew, could be completely different than Eric's, just based on your techniques, your deliveries. So I think that's one of the things that I've really come to understand through working with players on their wedges, and then later down on the road, like designing wedges, because there's so many elements that go into the design of wedges that capture each of those individual players and their corresponding techniques.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you mentioned predictability, and that's a really good word, and that resonates with me more so because of the development and acquisition of skill and expertise. So you know me, I'm from the motor learning background.
Yep.
And I come at things from a motor learning perspective and more of a neurological side. So when we're trying to develop skill and become increase our expertise and be on this road to becoming an expert, that's what the best seem to be able to do, and it's to accurately predict the future outcome. And so it really resonates with me that you guys are looking at wedges in this particular instance, but obviously with all of the lines of clubs you have. But if we just stick to wedges, you guys are really looking at all of them different elements that make up a wedge for this particular individual, whoever it may be, in order for them to better predict the outcome of that shot, and in our instance right now, the wedge. So a question, there's different grinds, different bounce, different obviously different designs, and coming from you and your role, can you share with the listener a little bit more about those different elements that you might change with a player? Like if you're working with a player and they have a certain technique, or they're having this type of interaction with the ground, what are the elements that you would look at changing from from the wedge to better help them with the predictability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that, and we may have discussed this during your visit out here, Matthew, that the industry, I think for so long has been kind of stuck around this notation of bounce, like bounce angle. But in reality, it goes so far beyond bounce angle. So
really,
it's
just,
not,
you just you don't just have the right bounce and that's
not
it. You're good.
yeah, it's just not a random bounce number on your on the bottom of your golf club. So this is going to be like our. I'm sure y'all have seen the movie Forrest Gump, where Bubba's talking about the different kinds of shrimp, different ways to cook shrimp.
Yep. Yeah.
Nice analogy, man. You know that Ben's gonna get real creative now and put Bubba Gump on this.
I love it. Yeah. So, I mean, here's just a couple. I actually made a list of some of the different soul grind elements that we go into
Nice.
when we're making and designing a new wedge. So, one, the actual angle of the bounce of the sole, and then you have the width of the sole in each location. So that width is changing constantly from heel to toe. You have the camber from heel to toe, which is like the curvature of the sole if you look at it from the front. You also have front to back camber. So from the lead edge to the trail edge, how rounded is that sole? Then you have the actual shaping of the lead edge. Is it sharper? Is it more blunted, kind of squared off? Or is it a rounded, a little bit more circular lead edge, straighter lead edge? And then you go into the different areas of relief. So you have heel relief, so just removing material away from the heel side of the golf club, and then trail edge relief, so kind of along like the back flange. That's just like a snippet of some of the elements that go into sole design. And kind of referring back to your original question, with different areas of shaping soles for players, just like as a quick example, like observing players' technique, if you're looking at you're working on their highest lofted wedge and they're hitting a flop shot or a little bit softer lob shot. Some players like to hit that shot like lowering the handle. So they squat down really low, they drop their hands a lot. And for those players who want to execute that kind of shot, usually when I'm working with them, they tend to prefer golf clubs that have a lot of relief in the heel section. Because as you're lowering your hands, you're engaging more with the heel side of the golf club.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
I said that makes sense like miles away from the microphone, so no one probably heard me on the screen.
Yep.
My bad.
And then some of the other players you see every now and then, they play their higher shots they stand kind of close to the ball and actually just lean the handle back. So they're exposing a lot of bounce when they hit those shots. So there's a lot of security through there. So for those types of players, hitting those shots, usually for them, the best way to construct the goal is to have trail. So you're just removing material along the back edge of the golf club. So you have lots of different options of, because players all have this kind of the same end goal in mind of like how they're visualizing a shot, but the way that they're going to execute it is going to be totally different. And I'm sure you see that daily from a coaching perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of those different elements kind of combine to give us a lot of opportunities to fit players into wedges that are best for them. So I think that's one of the coolest parts about it is that you're accommodating so many different techniques and player styles, and then you also have to take into consideration like the turf conditions that they're typically playing in. You can have somebody playing from the area where I'm from, the Carolinas, a little bit softer turf, the white fluffy sand in the bunkers, and then you come out to Arizona and start playing, and it's like hard packed during the summer. There's like no sand in the bunkers, really firm. So you have to cater your techniques and also a corresponding wedge design so that the players are going to be best serviced to hit all the shots that they're looking for.
Yeah, so I love this topic. I love talking about wedges in short games. So this is
only because he's pretty good at it.
Yeah, I've got like a million questions right now. It's all about my game though. No.
Yeah.
How, on a professional level, PGA Tour players, how frequently are they even switching clubs based on kind of what circuit they're on as far as, okay, they're on the East Coast swing versus the West Coast swing versus kind of the Southern swing. Are these players kind of frequently changing wedges based on those kind of turf conditions, or is it a lot of times they're sticking with the same wedge and just kind of adjusting technique? What's your experience been at that level?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it really varies a lot player to player. I would say for the most part, most of the guys kind of stick to their standard setup throughout the year, and they just slightly adjust their technique, or with their plan somewhere they not necessarily adjust their technique, but they pick out a different shot for those conditions. I would say on average, like most of our players probably get fresh wedges every 3 or 4 months. So they're going through three to four sets a year. And once again, it's very player dependent. You have some guys that are grinding on the range, hitting a ton of bunker shots, and they're just naturally going to wear out wedges a little bit faster. But then you have other guys that kind of like to play a set for half the year and sometimes even a full year, just based on, like I said, their practice habits and just their techniques in general. I think as a general rule, it seems like a lot of guys are putting in freshies right before Augusta every year because they're looking for max amount of zip possible out there. But I wouldn't say that they change a whole lot going from region to region. Sometimes British Open's a good example where you'll get a lot of guys that put in a lower bounce wedge there, just for nipping it off the hard pan, a little bit firmer conditions out there. But I think as a whole, especially like PGA Tour, US events, there's not a ton of variability in like a week-to-week setup, I would say.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this week's podcast. The game of the week coming at you this week is here to there putting. So what I want you to do is find 2 holes that are about 10 to 15 yards apart. You're going to walk to the middle of that distance, you're going to place a tee, and then you're going to put 2 additional tees on either side about 3 feet apart. So this is going to give you putts ranging from about 7 feet to about 30 feet. So it's really going to cover a lot of distance in putting. This is going to be good because it's going to help you not only with distance control, but also the direction, as well as dealing with some adversity, because it's a challenging game. Because you're going to start on one side of the tee, you're going to putt to the close hole. It has to be within 2 feet short of the hole to a club length past the hole. If you're successful there, turn around, hit another putt to the far hole. Again, same thing applies. Has to be 2 feet short to 1 club length past. You're going to try to get through all of these tees, achieving putts within that range. If at any point you don't get it within that window, you have a redemption putt from 10 feet to keep going. If you don't make the redemption putt, start all the way back at the beginning. Hope this game helps you develop some habits to deal with adversity, as well as dial in that speed and work on some direction. Now let's get back to the podcast.
You know, that one resonates with me as well. We talked about predictability, and then a word that came to my mind was adaptability. And when, again, I'm going to come at this from a motor learning perspective, and that's the ability that someone with a high level of skill, you know, someone who's an expert, which these guys are, they're classed as experts on the PGA Tour. You know, they're the 1% of the 1%, and at that level, that gift of adaptability is what they have, you know, going for them. They can go to different events and they can adapt pretty damn quickly, you know, because of the skill level that they've obtained over the years of practicing. So that makes sense how golfers and your experience makes sense that how these golfers rather just change the type of shot that they play, knowing the conditions and the environment and the constraints that golf course and that environment brings. They just make an adaptation of a movement they already know and just obviously adapt it to that environment and the demands that environment is given. So that makes perfect sense and is completely in line with every other domain that involves movement.
Sure.
Adapting, the experts adapt quicker to the environment. And we talked about this on our trip, you know, not too long ago, how the test that we created needed to be changed. Club needed to be changed more frequently, location, because that golfer would adapt quicker, and then the lesser skilled golfer doesn't adapt quicker. So these guys on the PGA Tour, yeah, that makes sense that they would adapt pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing to add on that is just kind of observing players. Their adaptability is so good in the sense of like, if they are trying to hit the same shot from one region to another, one turf condition to another, they know how to engage different parts of the wedge to execute the shot that they're looking to do. So usually the heel of the wedge is going to have the least amount of bounce, and the toe is going to have a little bit more, or they're going to play with less and more. So you'll see some of those players in hard pan situations, or they know how to use different portions of the sole correctly in those scenarios to where they're able to hit the same shots that they would in another location, but just do it by using their wedge in a different way. So it's really cool to watch them execute a shot on a fluffy lie or a tight lie, just by manipulating their technique just very slightly and using different portions of the wedge to execute that.
It's awesome. Cool, man. That's really cool.
That was something I've always wondered. For kind of your average golfer, your typical amateur golfer, I don't think people value the importance of getting fit for wedges. I think putters kind of fall in a similar category.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's kind of a lack of education, from the club pros standpoint, or if it's just people really just wanting to get the driver because they like hitting the ball far. But what would you say is kind of the most important things that amateurs, average golfers should be looking for in a wedge, and suggestions on, I guess, how frequently they should be changing wedges? It sounds like you said PGA Tour is like every 3 to 4 months typically.
Yep.
It's obviously player dependent, but just some of the key things, if you had to kind of have a list of things for amateur golfers that they need to be aware of when it comes to wedges, what would you, I guess, throw on that list?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's most critical, I would say, and it's the same thing that we see when we're working with PGA, LPGA, web.com. I think one of the best elements of a wedge fitting is, whether it's somebody at a green grass account, like a golf course, or in a big store, having like an interview session, almost like having a discussion prior to even hitting a wedge, of like understanding what are your desires for your wedge set. Like for me personally, like I play a 50, a 54, and a 58, and I know like what my requirements are for each of those clubs. So I think prior to going to get fit, you need to be thinking about where you use each of those individual clubs, the shots that you want to hit with each of those clubs. So like for me in my personal setup, like my 50 degree, I use it on some bump and run type shots, and then anything from like 100 to 120 yards. And I just want to be able to hit my number. So I place like the utmost importance on that wedge being able to hit a number from 100 to 120 yards from me. Then moving to like the sand wedge, I use that a lot chipping around the green, and a lot of the shots from 50 yards and out, the ones I want to flight a little bit lower, kind of skip into pins, and also using it out of the bunkers on some of like the chunk and run type shots. And then the 58 for me, I kind of use that as like my get out of jail club. I spray it all over the golf course, and I've got to find a way to try and get up and down every now and then.
Reminds me of Iain.
Yeah. He's not even here to defend himself.
Which makes this even better. He only sees it when it goes live.
Yeah, sees it when it goes live. But yeah, I think like for my 58, it's like using it in a lot of different situations where it needs to be versatile. I need to be able to hit hit higher lob shots. Some of the bunker shots that you got to get up in the air pretty quickly. And then just some other different shots, kind of, you got a tucked pin over a bunker. You can't really skip it in. So I think that's like one of the biggest keys before you even go hit any wedges is like really think about what you want to do with each of those clubs in your bag and how they best service your game. And then once you have that picture in your mind of how you plan to use each club, I think it's great like to tailor your fitting experience based on how you plan on using the wedge. So for me, like I was saying, the 50 degree where I'm hitting mostly full shots, I'm going to go get on a TrackMan and I'm going to hit wedges with that club and make sure that it's going to gap appropriately into my set, into my pitch and wedge. And also that it's hitting the flight, it's coming out in the window that I want to see it fly in. So I think for those more approach wedges, you're looking for those to hit a number. And I see that a lot with our tour players, that they're trying to get their gap wedge to like fly the number, and they want to be able to hit shots from 20 yards shorter or 15 yards shorter than that number up to their full number, and they want to have the utmost confidence in that. For the sand and the lob wedges, I think I can't overstress enough like how important it is to test wedges in like an on-course environment. I know that's something that we worked heavily on over the last 6-8 months, and really being able to see how that wedge is going to behave in different conditions. Because we all know like there's no two wedge shots the exact same. You have so many different scenarios that you can be placed in that you have to be in a position to try a wedge from a lot of different shots. Like you're not going to get value out of hitting 50 range balls and be like, oh yeah, that's good. I like that.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
believe it or
that's
not.
the way.
Yeah, so
I think that's a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but I think a lot of people when they go and get or pick out their wedges, I'm not even going to say get fit for wedges, they just go and they hit each wedge full. And there's no real understanding of, I really never hit a 58 or a 60 degree full. I always use it around the green or on this type of a shot or in these conditions. And I think that's a good point you bring up, that when you're going and looking at wedges, making sure that you're really trying to make sure that wedge is suited for the situations and the conditions that you're going to be using it in. Yeah,
it's if you find yourself on the golf course in a certain situation that, I can't seem to do this shot with what I've got right now. I don't seem to have anything that I can use to execute this shot with the goal I have in mind. Like I had it with a lady just a couple of days ago, and she's advancing quite well, and she's found that the more lofted shots around the green that are, the delicate, she's not trying to hit a number exactly. It's 20 yards out and in and around that distance. So she's trying to get a good sense and feel for getting this ball to launch a little higher and land a little soft to get over some of the bunkers and to keep the ball on the green. And I'm looking at the wedges that she has, and she has a sand wedge which matches the set. Because that worked at first. That was great. She got a box set, starter set of golf clubs. Okay, you got started in the game. That's fine. But now with that wedge, you don't have any. Yeah, the sole's like that, and it doesn't allow her to hit or to even experiment on different techniques to get the shot she's looking for. And then that from a coaching perspective, I would rather not even attempt to go into that lesson. Like I told this lady, look, with this club, there's no point us going through the concept and the technique and then trying to do it, because you're going to fail so much so that you might even get this such a negative experience that you don't ever want to try that shot again. So let's just work on putting today, or let's hit a different type of shot, which this club will do for you. And then once we get the right wedges, then let's learn that shot, because you'll have a tool that will allow you to do it. So, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. Having very clear expectations and goals before you purchase a wedge on, all right, what are you looking to do with the ball, and go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. In kind of this initial evaluation interview, however you want to phrase it, I think you have to, as a player, like you were mentioning, Matthew, you have to have expectations and an understanding of where you struggle currently. Because if you can cater your wedge selection to help with your traditional mistakes, like you see players a lot of times, it's like every time I get within 40 yards, I lay the sod over it or I blade it. Like the last thing we want is your equipment to be a hindrance. Like we want to protect against your mistakes and also like your great shots are going to be great, but we want to have security for your traditional mishaps that we know are going to happen. So we can have a wedge design that complements a player and helps to minimize their misses sometimes. So I think that's a really good point, especially with the anecdote that you shared with working with that lady. And it's so important to have a golf club that complements your technique, the shots you're trying to hit, and not get in the way. Like we want you to be able to execute the shot to the best of your ability, and we just want to be the tool that allows you to do it as good as you possibly can.
No, that's awesome. One last question for me. I mean, I'm sure I'll be emailing you a couple more, but one last one here. The one thing I get, or what was the one biggest thing that you took away when you started working with Ping and you started kind of seeing these guys on the PGA Tour and the ladies on the LPGA Tour that surprised you the most about their short game? And so what would be kind of that big takeaway for amateur golfers? I kind of have an idea of what mine was.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear what your kind of, wow, they do this very differently than I thought.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one of those ones too, it kind of evolves over time as you spend more time with each individual player. I think that from my observations and seeing players is that they have 2 or 3 shots that they know that they can pull off every single time. And they're super confident in their ability to play that shot and have the predictability. It's going to come out in the window that they expect. It's going to react a certain way when it hits the green. And they have the highest confidence in that. But then their ability to adapt when they get put in an absolutely crazy situation where they're 30 yards offline and they have to hit this miracle shot, they're able to lock in and focus and kind of really draw in on all the years of playing junior golf, up and down contests with their buddies from the craziest lies you can think of. And they find a way to adjust their technique and their delivery to hit the crazy shots that you see on TV all the time. And surprisingly, it's like the frequency that they're able to pull off those shots and have the confidence to go after it and hit the shots is really cool. I think another thing that I've really learned over the last couple of years of watching players hit wedges is their ability to control their trajectory. Watching how for the back pins, they tend to bring them in lower, skip them with a little bit of spin. I'm sure you've seen the shot all the time, the bounce once, check, and then just kind of tumble out. And then their ability to go up with the trajectory and stop it with height. I think it's really cool just to see the understanding that they have of how they can change their technique to hit different shots, but then also how they sometimes change the club in those circumstances, and they're never hitting full wedges. I think that's something we were speaking about earlier, is that they're able to hit so many different numbers with different flights and using different clubs. So they're truly masters of their craft when it comes to hitting different shots. It's a lot of fun to watch, and it's one of the things that's the coolest is just seeing them kind of go through the matrix of shots for different conditions and being able to see them executed on the course with the different wedges and their techniques is really cool.
Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. And you know what? I think we're at about 45 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up. But that was incredible. Eric, I'm excited. Jacob, I am super pumped about this. I think the topics we covered and the message that we're going to share and the information, the value of it, I think is priceless. It's absolutely badass. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. We just learned a lot, and no doubt the listeners and viewers are going to learn way more than what we have, at least. So that was fantastic. Thanks a lot for your time and your energy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas. It was a blast, and love talking wedges all the time. My wife gets sick of hearing me talk about wedges, so she's had to put up with it for long enough.
Nice. Just before I close this out, is there anywhere that people can go to maybe ask you any questions or ask for more information? Can they tweet you? Can they Facebook message you? Can they email you? Like, is there any other handles that people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say probably the best way would be through Twitter. The username on Twitter is at Jacob T. Clarke, and it's
Cool.
Clarke with an E. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
We'll
And
put that here somewhere in the screen for people.
perfect. Yeah, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to get back. So yeah, thanks again for having me, guys, and it was great talking through wedges, and it's a great Ping is an awesome company to work for, and it's truly a blast to be here every day and get to do what I'm passionate about. So yeah, thanks again for having me, guys.
Awesome, man. Well, to keep up to date with us and the show, please subscribe to our mailing list on gltgolf.com/podcast radio show. You can follow us on SoundCloud, or you can just like any of our social media channels. Twitter is at GLT Golf, Facebook is at Game Like Training Golf, or Instagram, which is at GL Training Golf. Everything we do, everything we say, podcasts, videos, articles written, it all gets published and shared on all of them platforms, so you won't miss anything. This was awesome. Thanks again. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.